Fun. Okay, so we are ready to discuss our lesson 7, chapters 58 to 60, although I forgot something, so I'm going to pause for. So we are going to talk about our review in the same way we have been the last few chapters, which is to do what pretty much Isaiah had been divided into, right? Like this sort of Old Testament half and this New Testament half. And so chapters 1 through 39 that we studied first, we've been able to say have one sort of overall theme. And what did we say we could, how could we describe that first half of the Bible? Not the Bible, Isaiah. Or the Bible.
Judgment and redemption.
Yeah. For who?
Israel.
Israel. And why did they have this judgment on them?
Sin.
Sin. They had been living in sin, turned to idols, turned away from God. And that was the subject of most of our chapters that they were, that Isaiah was speaking to them about. Starting in chapter 40, we have this turn in the chapters, and it's what people kind of refer to as the New Testament section of the book of Isaiah. And God starts that section with one new word. What's the word he gave them? Everybody?
Comfort.
Comfort. Comfort for his people.
Yes.
And so just as I review this week, I kind of wanted to ask you, if you were just to think about it, if you think about, because we're now 20 chapters in to chapter 40 in this new part, what are some of the ways that you would say he's been promising them comfort? What are some of the things that you could think of that he has said to them that would be words of comfort?
My wrath will end and I will gather you back to me.
Good. Yeah. That's a good one.
He declared his redemptive power to the people.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
He is sending his servant.
Yes, so we saw this promise of this servant that's going to come and bring this salvation to them. Good.
That he's going to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple, although they didn't know Jerusalem and the temple needed to be rebuilt, but he did promise he was going to do that.
Yes. And in fact, in the last few chapters we were in, when he talked to them about rebuilding their area and what it would be like, was it going to be just like it was before? The land and the people? What was going to be different?
There's going to be, the other nations are going to come to them, come to Israel, bringing their, I couldn't quite figure out if it was their children, the nation's children, or Israel's children back to them. It sounds like it's Israel's children back to them, but it could be that they're bringing the nations are bringing their sons and daughters to them. Got kind of lost in that one, but that other nations will be gathered to them and kings will bow down to them and riches will be brought to them.
Okay, and do you guys remember in one of the chapters we had last week, there was this series of verses that he said to do things in the land, that everything was going to expand. Do you remember that? Enlarge your tent, stretch out your cords, all of that. So they were actually going to experience increase when this happens, and they'll need increase because they are going to have more people eventually. So that promise of not just a restoration to a state that they had been in, but an increase in people and in land and in joy and wealth and everything. And we'll see some of that yet tonight. Some of the promises are some words that we have started to mark repeatedly that are great words, and we would think of them as sort of New Testament words. Or do you know any of those? What is going to happen when that new Redeemer comes and that new promise?
Salvation?
Salvation would be one. What other kinds will they live in? What other things?
Peace.
Peace. We're going to see that again. Righteousness was a word that we were marking. Light, all of those things are words we're starting to see over and over and over compared to the judgment chapters that we went through before. Although this week there is some talk about an issue that they still have to deal with. But if they deal with that issue, they will have these other promises. We started to mark another word 2 out of 3 chapters last week, and it's in at least 1 chapter this week. This promise he's made to them, he strengthens it by making a pact with them. What do we call that pact when God makes it?
Covenant.
Covenant.
Everlasting covenant.
Everlasting, exactly. That he makes an everlasting covenant, and he repeats that repeatedly. And then tonight we'll look at some cross references. So last time he gave them examples of Noah, he gave them the examples of David, and now he's going to talk about another covenant he had with them, and then a covenant that was yet to come. So God is a covenant keeping God. He is covenant, and it helps to understand him when you actually understand covenant. So, and all these promises, as Dee Dee's already said, leading also to the one who is to come to bring all these things to them. So good, you can kind of, it's one of the ways we can look at these chapters. We can look at the messages, which we've been doing, who's speaking, who are they to, what are they for, but also every chapter you could kind of look and see where's the comfort, you know, what comfort is God promising them? It would be another way to kind of work on themes by looking at comfort. It's a great list in these verses, even for us. Okay, so we are going to start with chapter 58. And is everybody good to read tonight? Okay, I just need 2 of you the first time. And in my order, I have Pat and then Fran. Okay, chapter 58.
Oops, sorry. Isaiah 58. Cry loudly, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet and declare to my people their transgression and to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me day by day and delight to know my ways, as a nation that has done righteousness and has not forsaken the ordinance of their God. They ask me for just decisions. They delight in the nearness of God. Why have we fasted and you do not see? Why have we humbled ourselves and you do not notice? Behold, on the day of your fast, you find your desire and drive hard all your workers. Behold, you fast for contention and strife and to strike with a wicked fist. You do not fast like you do today to make your voice heard on high. Is it a fast like this which I choose? A day for a man to humble himself? Is it for bowing one's head like a reed and for spreading out sackcloth and ashes as a bed? Will you call this a fast, even an acceptable day to the Lord? Is this not the fast which I choose? To loosen the bonds of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free, and break every yoke. Is it not to divide your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into the house, when you see the naked, to cover them?
And not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then your light will break out like the dawn, and your recovery will speedily spring forth, and your righteousness will go before you. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry, and he will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and the speaking wickedness, and if you give yourself to the hungry, and to satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then your light will rise in darkness, and your gloom will become like midday. And the Lord will continually guide you and satisfy your desire in scorched places, and give strength to your bones. And you will be like a watered garden and a spring of water. whose waters do not fail. Those from among you will rebuild the ancient ruins. You will raise up the age-old foundations, and you'll be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets in which to dwell. If because of the Sabbath you turn your foot from doing your own pleasure on my holy day and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and honor it, desisting from your own ways and seeking your own pleasures and speaking your own word, then you will take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth, and I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob, your father. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
Okay, good. So the mouth of the Lord in chapter 58, this is one instance here where we really get to see the person who's named for the book doing the speaking, right? This sounds like Isaiah giving a message to the people, because we know it's not the people themselves because the message is to them. What is the message according to verse 1? That's the issue.
The people need to hear their about their transgressions and their sins. They
Okay,
need
good.
to hear that.
Yeah, so tell them, he says, tell them, yell it out like a trumpet, tell them. He gives an example then of one of the areas in which they have a problem. Then he'll describe to them how they're doing that. Then he describes what he wants from them. And then he gives another issue at the end. So what is the first topic here that is the problem?
The way they're fasting or the reason for their fasting.
Okay, so it's a little bit confusing, or can be, when
Mhm.
you look at verses 2 and 3, because it sounds like he's saying they're doing it right, but is that what he's saying?
No,
No.
No,
If we looked at verse 2 and instead of it saying as a nation, if it said as if you were a nation that was doing this, that's kind of how we would read it, right? What is he saying there in verse 2? What do they seem to be doing here in 2 and 3?
They're saying they're fasted, they're on the outside doing these things for God. And why isn't God responding? Why isn't God, answering their prayers?
Okay, so
And
they
he's
think,
looking at
go
their
ahead.
motive.
Yeah, they think they've done it, right? We've humbled ourselves. You do not notice. So what is he actually saying about them? If you kind of read verse 2 with that idea in mind, that he's not actually saying they're doing it well.
he's saying they're doing it for their own desires.
Yes. He's saying, yes, you're doing this as if you're a nation who's done righteousness, as if you haven't forsaken the ordinances of the way. You're seeking me. And then he uses that phrase, you fast to find your own desire. Then he goes on to describe a couple other things about how they're fasting. What does he say that they normally do when they're fasting?
They drive hard all their workers.
Okay, so they're bad bosses,
Yes.
right? While they're fasting. Yeah,
They strike with the wicked fist.
yeah.
Um, they don't humble themselves.
Okay,
And then they're letting the world know that they're fasting, like they're suffering or something, by bowing their head like a reed
okay,
in sackcloth.
okay, good. So there's those outside pictures of it, and they think they've humbled themselves, but he talks about their actions. And are their actions, if you're driving your workers hard, you want to strike with a wicked fist. And what are those other two words in verse 4?
Contention and strife.
Contention and strife. Is that a heart that's in what the state of mind we should be in to fast?
No.
No. Depending, and everybody here, fasting is a wide range of, depending on how you were raised in the faith or what faith you're with, what you do. There's just this huge range of fasting. And again, we're going to see what God's point really is. And we also know how Jesus dealt with it, or you can look at that. And so it's interesting that people can become very legalistic about it when God's going to use a word here to be his main focus that seems to be saying, get rid of all that, right? What is as he starts to talk about the fast that he would choose, what's one of the key words that he uses to describe how he would have it? What does he want them to do?
Loosen the bonds of wickedness.
Yes,
Like-
so we start to mark yoke or bonds many times. That's one of them. Get rid of your wickedness, first of all, which they were trying to fast while they were still focused on their own desires. What else are they supposed to loosen?
Bands of the yoke.
Yeah, on who?
The oppressed.
The oppressed. So
Yeah.
let oppressed go free. Get rid of your wickedness. What else are they supposed to break the bonds of?
Hunger
Hunger,
Homeless.
and homelessness.
yep, hunger, the homelessness, the poor. You're supposed to get focused on those and getting rid of those instead of focus on themselves. This is interesting idea, God here talking about that what they seem to think was that their religious, in quotes, activity was what God wanted from them. Doesn't it seem like they've had an awful lot of time with him by the time we get to Isaiah the prophet to already understand that God never wanted just religious activity from them? I'm pretty sure he's spoken to them about that before. What do we think about that? I know they asked you a few application questions about fasting, but what do you think God is saying here that we could walk away with about that kind of religious activity?
I think whatever you do, you have to have a servant's heart into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever it is. I don't care if you're serving lunch on Thursday night at the church. You know, you need to do it with a servant's heart. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Yep.
Well, doesn't it also go back to him saying, I don't want your sacrifices, I want mercy?
Yep. Yep. It was never that again.
Never, yeah.
Yeah. And again, he designated all of these things, but they never seemed to get the connection. It wasn't to check a box. It was, he had a purpose for it, and they never put that purpose in there. They never put their hearts in there, or they didn't stay that way. Even if there were times where they did, they seemed to forget. What about us? Do you think that we can approach this kind of religious activity the same way sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah. You know?
Yes, I can, many times I've found myself like I'd be doing some kind of menial task, you know, washing dishes or something like that after a potluck. Everybody else is out having a good time. And I have to catch myself, and I'm like, I enjoy doing this. You know, this is not a chore. This is not something that I'm begrudging, and treat it more like I'm practicing just being less of myself and more thinking about others. And when I do that, then I find the joy in it again.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of perspective and how you're doing things or thinking about things, or just your prayer or life, or just life in general. I find myself, if I start dwelling on myself too much, oh, poor me, or what about me, all like that, then everything gets off, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Lately, I really tried to intentionally put the phrase, do it as if it's for the Lord, in my head on a few things, because it is ultimately whenever we serve other people. But yeah, with leaving town and company coming, I had a bit of, normal kinds of things we all do in our homes, but they all had to be done at a certain time and maybe better than usual. And so as I got tired, I just thought, no, you need to keep a good perspective here and do this as if it's for the Lord. And it does make a difference, right? It does. But it's easy to say they and them here when we read these kinds of words, but these are the ones where you can pretty easily go, I think he's talking to more than just the people of Israel in this one.
Yeah, I was thinking of, I could go and let's say, and I see Jesus. And he's kind of looking at me and I'm like, okay, I worked in the cafeteria. I went to the mission and I served and I did this. And he said, I don't know you. I was like, where were you? You know, when, when, you know, and that's why I said, if I went to do something, it's like I wasn't doing it even for them. I was doing it for Jesus. I was not
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah,
So, 'cause
seeing him is a good idea. Any other thoughts on that, on how we could look at it, or sometimes where we might be? It's easy when you're doing something, especially if there's the kind, depending on how you were raised, or even if you've tried to keep a habit, if there's a habit that you do, especially, it's very easy. And that's the best intention in the world, to do something regularly. But it's almost as soon as we do it regularly, then it can easily turn into check that box instead of the joy that we're supposed to have when we're in it. And it is so easy for a habit to become a bad habit.
Yeah.
So, God, though, tells them, so he tells them what he wants. He wants us to focus on him, which they were focused on themselves, and he wants them to focus on caring for others instead of just their own desires. Then he says, there's this great list, right, of if you do this activity this way, instead of still in your sin, then you'll have a bunch of great things will happen. What's the list he starts to give them here?
I like the first one on 8, how then your light will break out like the dawn. And I think when I hear that, it's just your joy, the light that's inside you that he wants you to, that's going to draw others to Christ,
Yeah.
will come out.
Yeah, good. A lot of focus on light. This one, like the dawn. I like that too. What goes with that one? I like the second line of that verse as well.
Mm.
And your recovery will speedily spring forth.
Yeah, what do you think
And
he
then-
means by your recovery?
Well,
From what?
I don't know if he just meant their captivity and then their return from their captivity, or the recovery of their hearts of stone to hearts of flesh. So it could either be what they're seeing as their oppression by outside forces, but also could be their own recovery to be God's people again, their individual recovery.
Yeah, if we think about the context, yeah, both those things, because if they were crying out to him, as apparently they decided, well, maybe because of what Isaiah is telling them, they've decided they need to fast, and they obviously want something. And so God will say, if you want that thing, if you do this, those things will come to you if you have the right hearts, right? Not the recovery of whatever it is they're asking to be healed or fixed. Yeah. What else is going to go with this recovery?
like your righteousness will go before you and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Second time we've had this idea of the Lord behind us, right? As we go forward somewhere and having him there. Again, what did you think of when we talked about this the other time too? What does it mean to you to know that the Lord is behind you and not just leading you, but behind you as well?
He's got your back.
Yeah, it makes me feel more secure because
Yeah.
we can't focus on our front and our back at once.
No, That's a good point. Yeah, really good point. Yeah, if you're moving forward, especially if that's what God's asking to do and you are full on moving forward, there's no time for thinking about what's back there. And him saying he's got it is just a great, great promise. Okay, what other important thing do we see that they need to know based on what they were trying to get from him?
Like, and when you call, the Lord's going to answer and you'll cry and he's going to say, here I am.
Yes, Because
So
that's
they're
what
not
they,
gonna hear from him.
yes, they were complaining about the fact that they had done this and he wasn't noticing, he wasn't answering. So he says, then I will. Good. Then he sort of repeats his message from earlier with these ifs, right? If you do these things, what were they again? If you do what?
Give yourself to the hungry,
Yep,
satisfy the desire of the afflicted.
yep.
I guess stop pointing the finger and speaking wickedness.
Mm,
Yeah, there's that contention idea, right? This pointing the finger and speaking wickedness. You've got to stop that. And then this time your light will become like what?
Like midday.
Yeah, so we already had the dawn and now it's like this increasing light, right? By the midday.
Hmm.
Good. What
And then
else?
the best, and then the best, the Lord will continually guide you.
Yeah, perfect. Continually. Great word there. And when he does that, what do you become like?
A watered garden.
Watered garden, because he's giving you the things that you need for that, right? Is the picture there. Okay, what else is there before he takes a turn and for 2 verses brings up one other religious activity, but anything else you guys have from verses 1 through 12?
I just like that, the description of the strength gives strength to your bones. And
Yeah.
then you've got the dry bones, almost reference again, and then like the watered garden. It's just beautiful. It's
Yeah,
beautiful,
It-
just
it
to
is.
visualize that.
Yeah. Yeah, those contrasts and those word pictures in Isaiah, after you get kind of used to what you're reading, they're just so helpful to see what he's talking about. Okay, so he dealt with fasting, that even though they're fasting, which is meant to bring them closer to him, if he calls them to do that, they're still doing it in the wrong manner. So even in that, they're still in sin while they do it, which we'll see how he goes on to deal with that. And then he also focuses on one other religious activity that's meant to be a good thing, but they are apparently not doing that as well either, which is what?
Sabbath.
keeping the Sabbath.
The Sabbath. Again, what words do you see there? They're similar to what we saw about fasting. How do they appear to be handling the Sabbath?
So they're
their own
doing their
pleasure.
own pleasure on God's holy days.
Yeah, their own pleasure. He says, but if you turn your foot, right, if you turn from doing that, then what does he want them to do? To seek whose pleasure?
God's pleasure.
Yeah, if you stop
Delight in the
looking
Lord.
at your own and take delight in the Lord, then what will he make you?
Ooh. Mm.
Right on the heights of the earth.
Yeah,
And you know, I get this. When I read this, I got this because I've been trying to observe the Sabbath.
I thought
Yeah.
about you, Jocelyn. I thought about
Yeah.
you.
And it's so hard because everything happens, it seems like, on a Saturday. So I try to do from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday.
Okay,
Yes,
so you're trying to
Friday
observe
night.
it on
Friday.
that the Sabbath day and not the Lord's day. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it on the 7th day because I did some research on the Sabbath in the Bible and it talks about it.
Okay.
And it is so hard because everybody that I've been akin to somewhat, they're, doing it on a Sunday. And I still find myself going to church on Sunday and I go, you're going to have to make up your mind because what you're trying to do is you're riding the fence. You're trying to observe it on a Saturday, but you're still going to church on the Sunday. So I got to find
Yeah.
out, because there's that thing about don't forsake the gathering of yourselves with like-minded people.
Yeah.
So it's finding that and doing it, but I am so used to doing so much on Saturday and half doing stuff on Sunday that it's really kind of hard. So I'm wondering if I got to get this thing together, but it's something I got to go through, I think, before I can get to where I need to get to it.
Yeah, that's interesting just to see what the what Jews who observe a Sabbath really have to go through by having it on that day. But one thing I will say is that New Testament, the reason we have it on Sunday is because when Jesus died and was resurrected, the new church made the Lord's Day instead of Sabbath. The new Christians observed, they started their week with the Lord instead of ending. So I think you're right. You will have to kind of make a decision about which way. It'll be a struggle in our culture. I think
Yeah.
that just the practice alone that you went through would definitely have served you, at least in seeing what it's really like. Even on Sunday or whatever day, you know, some people who end up working on Sunday, anytime you try to have a Lord's Day, whatever the day of the week is, how do we do with that, do you think, in general?
Not according to the way God wants us to do.
Not according to this. What are some of the things Jesus tried to make clear, do you think, to the disciples that are that relate to Isaiah fairly interestingly, I think? Do you remember him being called out about the Sabbath?
Yes, when they were walking through the fields and let me see, it was Simon grabbed some weed or whatever, and they got in trouble for working.
Yeah,
And Jesus told them the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So
yeah,
it was a day of resting in the Lord. So what my thing is I try to do things of resting in the Lord, which is a hard concept. When you haven't done it. Before, it was always resting in Jocelyn, doing the desires of Jocelyn's heart.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I have some friends who are Seventh-day Adventists, and they
Okay,
do the Sabbath on Saturday,
on Saturday.
Friday and Saturday.
Right.
They do some other things that I'm not so akin with, but you know, they tend to get together and they talk and they have, you know, food together, and then they do volunteer work and so forth like that.
Okay.
They can help people out. So I might end up doing some things with them, but right now it's still like a chore.
Yeah.
And as I was reading verses 13 and 14, I go, "Ooh, Jocelyn, you've got some work to do." Because you're not looking at it as a delight as it should
Yeah.
be versus a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot easier to do it if you as a community are all on board. You're out there trying to do it on your own. That's very
Well, that's why I'm
challenging.
saying I got to find a community to do it with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, because that is the only thing that is going to do that. But, you know, I think for all of us that it's just, in one way it's hard, but as I look at Isaiah 58 with that focus on God telling them to release the yokes and release the oppression, I think it's so interesting that he seemed to be saying even then, get rid of your legalistic check mark minds. And
Yeah.
Jesus said the same thing. And yet, what did the Jews do in between God and Jesus? They added more and more and more things that they made it more oppressive than God had even asked them to do. So I think for me, I find that in all the areas where God gives us freedom, yet we still feel like, but you also say to do this, God, it's hard to find what he wants when he says, well, you know, you would, if your donkey falls down, you're going to pick it up, right? So he had all this grace about it. And so, but yet when you don't want to completely just let it all go, it is a balance that is a bit difficult. Although I think the exercise in at least thinking about it and trying it the way you're doing it, Jocelyn, is such a great spiritual exercise to understand
Mhm.
what we really think and do in terms of what am I doing for him?
Keeping the Lord's day or the Sabbath holy. You know, it's probably an interpretation that only you. What is your concept of holy? I
Yeah.
was talking to my husband about that today, and I was like, you know, I actually can get on the lawnmower, my zero-turn lawnmower, and it to me, I am thinking all sorts of great thoughts about God during that time, nature and about things that are growing. And to me, it's relaxing. Now, is that work, or is that, you know, I'm tuned out to the world. I just, you know, so I don't know if that, you know, that there's just so many nuances there, even with fasting. You know, is it fasting from
I know.
day to the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, or is it a period of time in there that you maybe you miss a meal, you pray during those meals, or you know, I don't think there's a set thing it's in the there's nothing set in the Bible even about either
No,
one of
there isn't.
those.
In fact, if you read his list, there's nothing about food at all, except for giving it to other people. So
Mhm.
we have done those things. And again, I think you're right, Fran, that it is about what you feel God asking you to do and how you do it. And I agree. I think, and it goes back to our conversation earlier about doing things with a servant's heart and for him. And so your time on the mower, I have other times as well where they're more
Gardening.
mindless activities, gardening, crocheting is one of those things that I have where
Mhm.
I don't have to think after a while. And so I'll pray. Like
Oh,
when I've
good
given
for you.
blankets to people, I have frequently
Ah,
prayed for them while I'm crocheting for them. And so that could be something that if I was doing that on a Sabbath would feel very Sabbathy. But yet, yeah, there's the balance is interesting.
It
Yeah.
is, because last Saturday I had that tree down in my yard and
Oh, yeah.
my neighbors were out there working on it, and I'm going, so I thought about, okay, Jesus says, what with one of you, if you had an animal, whatever, I can't think of the animal's name, was
Yeah.
in a ditch or something, you would not go rescue. I go, okay, here I go. Then I tried to have conversation about Jesus and God and so
Yeah.
forth while I was out there, because I go, I can't let them out there do that without.
Right. Right. Yeah. I know. And I know once a week, huh, Fran, at least. So you must have a weird satellite or something that goes through like once a week or so, like at a certain time. So, oh, oh no, that was twice. But yeah, I do. I think that wherever you end up, Jocelyn, and where it's been, I've just been, yeah, I thought about you as I did this homework. So I remembered you talking about trying to really focus on a Sabbath. And I wondered what you would say tonight when we talked about it.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I think grace and mercy and those things are good. It's funny because I think probably those of us that worry about it or think about it probably are fine. It's people that never do anything or any of it, never really give it a thought, that probably need to give it a thought. But then I don't know. It's always hard. I always feel like the people who say, when you do a good deed, then you feel good because you did the good deed, so it didn't really count because it made you feel good, right?
Yeah, you got paid. It's like
And
you got paid for it, right?
you're just in this vicious cycle of I can't do it, I can't do it.
I don't have this problem, but my husband is one of those type A's that doesn't ever like to take any day off from
Yes.
work.
Yeah.
And so I think this is one of those things that God's trying to look out for your spiritual, your mental health, and your,
For sure.
just say, take a day off,
Yeah.
chill,
Yeah.
just don't work yourself into the ground. And I imagine a lot of the Jewish people back in the day were a lot of type A's, you know.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. It's not good for us. And eventually anything that's not good for us in those kind of spiritual ways
Mm.
are never end up being good for our relationship with God either, because you end up in a position we're going to see the people end up in. Yeah, I think, there are entire studies on fasting and on the Sabbath. So obviously we could talk about that chapter for a long time, but it's always good to take a bit of time to think
She
about them.
mentioned something about a study that you could, I think it was in the beginning of the,
Oh, they probably have a 40-minute study on
yeah.
fasting.
Fasting, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, those ones are really good on your own or with small groups. That's the type of study we did last summer on heaven and hell.
Mm.
Good. Well, let's move into 59 because he's going to talk with them. So if Fran, if you would do the first
Okay.
page and Jocelyn the second page, then I'll take the third, and that'll leave the last chapter back for you guys who started with us. So, all right, chapter 59.
Behold, the Lord's hand is not so short that it cannot save, nor is his ear so dull that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he does not hear. For your hands are defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken falsehood, your tongue mutters wickedness. No one sues righteously, and no one pleads honestly. They trust in confusion and speak lies. They conceive mischief and bring forth iniquity. They hatch out adder's eggs and weave the spider's web. He who eats of their eggs dies, and from that which is crushed, a snake breaks forth. Their webs will not become clothing, nor will they cover themselves with their works. Their works are works of iniquity, and an act of violence is in their hands. Their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed innocent blood. Their thoughts are thoughts of iniquity. Devastation and destruction are in their highways.
They do not know the way of peace, and there is no justice in their tracks. They have made their paths crooked. Whoever treads on them does not know peace. Therefore, justice is far from us, and righteousness does not overtake us. We hope for light, but behold darkness. For brightness, but we walk in gloom. We grope along the wall like blind men. We grope like those who have no eyes. We stumble at midday, as in the twilight. Among those who are vigorous, we are like dead men. All of us growl like bears and moan sadly like doves. We hope for justice, but there is none. For salvation, but it is far from us. For our transgressions are multiplied before you, and our sins testify against us. For our transgressions are with us, and we know our iniquities, transgressing and denying the Lord, and turning away from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving in and uttering from the heart lying words. Justice is turned back, and righteousness stands far away. For truth has stumbled in the street, and uprightness cannot enter. Yes, truth is lacking, and he who turns aside from evil makes himself a prey. Now the Lord saw, and it was displeasing in his sight that there was no justice.
And he saw that there was no man, and was astonished that there was no one to intercede. Then his own arm brought salvation to him, and his righteousness upheld him. He put on righteousness like a breastplate, and a helmet of salvation on his head. And he put on garments of vengeance for clothing, and wrapped himself with zeal as a mantle. According to their deeds, so he will repay wrath to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. To the coastlands he will make recompense. So they will fear the name of the Lord from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. For he will come like a rushing stream, which the wind of the Lord drives. A redeemer will come to Zion, and to those who turn from transgression in Jacob, declares the Lord. As for me, this is my covenant with them, says the Lord. My spirit, which is upon you, and my words, which I have put in your mouth, shall not depart from your mouth, nor from the mouth of your offspring, nor from the mouth of your offspring's offspring, says the Lord, from now and forever. And that's a place we started talking about last week. So in chapter 59, it's as if God is still speaking to them about this sin that was their problem with their fasting and with their Sabbath. And he starts off with a bit of good news, and then he goes on to list the condition that they're in. So what's the good news that he starts out with?
That he can save and that he will always hear them.
Okay, good. That he can listen and that he can save them. Then there's but. But their iniquities have done something, right? What has happened because of their iniquity? So,
Separated from God.
and because they're separated, then what else has happened?
He hid his face from them.
Okay.
And he's not here.
Do you know what's so interesting is that we have this tendency to read things like that in that order. If you look at that verse, what is it? Did God turn his face?
No, the sins have hidden his
The
face.
sins have hidden. And this, because there's a lot of times when people want to say, oh, God said he'll never turn away from us. He'll never not hear us. And then we hear this and we think, oh, but it says he did, but he doesn't. Our sins hide his face so that he does not hear. In the same way as when Jesus was on the cross, we know that the weight of that sin for that brief moment, even Jesus could feel that separation from God. And so this word to them about sin, I know people who want to say, oh, God always hears our prayers, even no matter what we're doing, if we're saved. So you guys had some cross references. They put them on the final page of the homework. They didn't put them with this, but this is where they wanted you to be thinking about them. So when you looked, whether it was Psalms or Proverbs or the New Testament, what did you find about this word? Is just this and just an Old Testament idea about sin separating us from God?
No.
No, I mean, isn't that foundational to sort of any of those bracelets or bridges or little booklets you're going to give, right? That's the starting point. Your sin separates you from God. What else did you guys learn from those? There were 6 of them, but they weren't really long or intense. They were page 74, I think.
I actually copied and pasted and I can't find them.
Oh, you can't find them. Oh, okay.
Can't find them.
Well, anything you remember?
But God does not hear the wicked.
Okay, that's the first thing in Proverbs, right? He's far
Yep.
from the wicked. He hears the prayer of the righteous, though. There's good news there.
But
Good.
not the wicked.
And Psalm 66:18. It's,
Mhm.
if we cherish sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened.
Yeah. So far, we've talked still from the Old Testament. So what if somebody tells you, oh, that's just the Old Testament? What's the New Testament say?
Same thing. John 9 says God does not hear sinners.
Yeah. I didn't look for sure, but usually in John, a lot of the person talking is Jesus. Is Jesus saying this himself? I'm guessing he probably is. But he doesn't hear sinners, but if you worship God and do his will, he does hear, right? So there's that same connection. The next 2 verses, I rearrange them. I do this frequently. I rearrange my homework. I like it better if you read 1 John 1:9 first, because then I think it flows really nicely into the next one. What does 1 John 1:9 say?
Okay. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and righteous, so that he will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Okay, good. So once we recognize, we confess, he cleanses us from unrighteousness. And then what do you learn in 2 Corinthians 5:21?
For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
Okay, so he made Jesus, who had no sin, to become that sin for us. And then we get to become that righteousness that was his. And so I like how that follows how we get that righteousness, first of all, from 1 John, this connection. So do these passages agree with what Isaiah is telling the people?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So this word for us is that same one, right? That if we, saved or not, if you take a path that leads you really far from where God is, you're going to get to a point where he can't be there with you, right? As holy God, he can't engage with you in certain acts of sin, in wickedness. But if you turn back, then he will accept you and hear you, right? In a way, that's just really, it's really good news.
That's what a lot of people really, really need to hear. And I'm even talking about myself years ago. I thought there is no way that God will forgive me, and I was looking like I couldn't even forgive myself. So
Yeah.
this needs to be heard by everybody who thinks that they've done something so bad that they can't never return back to God.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect context here in Isaiah, right? Look at what how he has described his own people. The level of sin to which they have gone to, worshiping idols, abandoning and rejecting him. And even to this is to them, he says this word, you can turn and I will still hear you if you do. Yeah.
God is an if and when God.
He is an if and when God.
If you do this, then I'll do that. That's okay.
Right. Yes. So
It's a relationship. I think if you look, he's trying to build a personal relationship, which I think Old Testament was not as, it wasn't, silly dog. It wasn't, it didn't seem like that was what people, it was more the priest was between them and all like that. Well,
yeah,
God is now coming straight to you and working on your personal relationship with him. And you can't, with anybody, you can't develop a trusting relationship if you've got some buried secret or
mhm,
some garbage between you and that other person. So it just, it seems like a simple concept. We've made it very complicated,
yeah,
but I mean, you can go to those altar calls and you think, well, they're saying it this different ways and all like that, but I'm not sure people get it until they're, I don't know, have to be hit over the head by circumstances or something, you know?
Yeah,
Really get
friend,
it.
just
Sometimes
don't go to the altar and say, Lord, I know I sinned, but don't put the but in there, because he will let you know that you don't justify anything by your excuses. You're like, I'm the justifier. That's my job, not yours, Pat. I'm just talking to myself. Woo.
yeah. He sees and hears it all, right? Our justifications, our reasons why something was okay, or
Yeah.
we don't need to say something. And so when
No.
we reach that point, you already know, he already knows. My grandson's favorite song right now on the radio is Truth Be Told. Have you guys heard that song? Yeah, it's a really good song, which says, there's no failure, no fall, no sin you don't already know, truth be told. And so you might as well just let it all out there. And just truth, right? He knows it all already. So in order to point out to them the fact that they're probably not approaching fasting or Sabbath or any other religious activity the way that he would like them to, he starts telling them about their sin. What do you learn when you look at verses 3 through, I don't know, a long way? What do you learn about their level of sin?
Pretty deep. Hands defiled with blood, fingers with iniquity, with sin. They lie, speak wickedness. They sue each other. Apparently that was a big thing back then too. People
Yeah.
suing people for no reason. They more lies that they hatch snake eggs,
Yeah, yeah,
spider webs, and then they eat the eggs and die. Ooh, nasty stuff.
yeah. It's a powerful picture. Yep. It gets worse or it gets more. What else?
Well, their feet run to evil,
Yep.
and they hasten to shed innocent blood, and they just
Yeah.
think about sin all the time.
Yeah. Just kind of like a previous time frame, right? Like they sound an awful lot like why God destroyed the earth one time, right? And because of that, there's a focus in verse 8 that's become a focus for us, a promise that he gives us, but they're lacking it. What are they going to lack while they're in this state?
They don't know the way of peace.
Yeah.
Justice.
Yeah. Peace and justice. This idea, he's been telling them that there's peace for them. He says, you're not going to be there. You're not going to have it while you are in this state. And isn't that true, right? When you're just kind of in these wrong frames of mind, there isn't peace. I mean, that is definitely, I think, a time where when we don't feel peace, we really need to stop and do some self-evaluation, because there can be a lot of reasons why it's not there. But a good place to start is like, have I turned? Am I somewhere I am not supposed to be? Because
Mhm.
this is not peace, right?
Right.
Heaven knows the
Yeah,
world
yeah.
can keep us from peace, but sometimes there might be other reasons. Um, so they continue now. It's as if God's been telling them, and now either they or Isaiah speaking for them goes ahead and lists where they are, like a recognition. And how does he describe their state?
Blind, they're blind.
Yeah.
They're like bears moan like doves, growl like bears and moan like doves.
Yeah,
Mm.
there, I thought that's funny. In my homework, I wrote like they're crabby and sad, right? They're
Oh.
crabby and they're grouchy and, because they're lost. They're just lost is the description. What do you think the fact that says they're in the darkness, but what do they actually want?
Light.
Right.
They want the light, but they're in the darkness. Do they know where they could be finding light? Supposedly, right? So it's just those places where you go, but it's right there. God told you how to have it. Why are you walking
Sometimes
in
we
darkness?
like to wallow in our own misery, you know? I
Yeah.
think, woe is me.
Yeah.
And that's like that, gloom, despair, and agony on me. That's what I thought of that song. Deep,
Yeah.
dark depression,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think they're kind of like us. We can hear something one time, and then when we hear it a third or fourth time, it might click that
Like,
this is what they were talking about. This is what that means.
yeah. Yeah. I just thought there was some really good impact here in thinking about, okay, sad and crabby means you're probably fumbling around in the dark. And probably that's another good time to do some self-evaluation. Like, where is my light and my hope? So they want hope, and it's not there either. What else do they say? Continuing on, there's a word we just continue to mark through here.
They hope for justice, but there is none, and also for salvation, which is far from them.
Yeah. And then they say why. Like, at least Isaiah knows why. What does he say?
All transgressions have built up
Yeah.
before them. So
Yep.
the sins testify against them, and transgressions are with them, and they even know their iniquities,
Mm-hmm.
but they're transgressing and denying the Lord and turning away from God. So
Yeah, so there we're right back to Isaiah chapter 1, right? Isaiah chapter 1, that is what we have been giving as our theme for all of the first 39 chapters. That they've sinned, they turned away from God, and so this judgment is coming, but with the promise of restoration. There they are. We've turned away from God. Instead of turning toward God, what are they focused on?
Oppression and revolt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that from you think that's from a situational thing that's going on, the bickering between the people, or is it with their relationships with their fellow man? I wonder what they mean by
I
that.
don't know. It could be with each other, since we saw the reference to that even when they sue, they don't do it righteously, because God did have provisions for those kinds of things, but they're not doing any of this with with God's way in mind. So it just sounds like a people that are just completely off the track in everything that they're supposed to be doing, like even how they treat their workers and laborers. And God had ordinances for them about all of that so that they would live in harmony with each other, with other nations, and with him. And they have completely put all that aside.
I'm thinking, it just reminds me of rebellious children, that don't want to listen to the prophet or the king or anyone in authority. And
Yeah.
they just want to bicker and be contentious and stir up trouble. And
Yeah.
kind of that's what we're doing today.
Yes, and as we talk about what we're doing today, we have a verse here that's very interesting. As they say that justice, righteousness, and truth have all left them, it's lacking. And then there's this one sentence stuck in here in the middle. In fact, in the homework, I got confused because I thought they were focused on it from verse 20, and I didn't understand the question until in my review, I went, oh, they're talking about verse 15. So what happens to the people who turn aside from evil?
They make themselves a prey.
They make themselves a prey. In the world we live in today, if you're a righteous person turning away from evil, can you hear examples in your mind? Do you know this as a real thing right now? It is so real. And what's sad is who is making them a prey? When you're a righteous person, who's being spoken to here?
So,
Are they talking about foreign nations?
No.
No,
People.
themselves, right? Other
Yeah.
people, the people of themselves who do not turn away. So their own people are turned on themselves. Do we have that going on today? Are Christians making other Christians pray? Yes, you may not always hear these things because obviously anything in the church doesn't always become news. But
Right.
if you listen to certain Christian podcasters or radio, then you know what's happening. This is really happening. I don't know if we'll get canceled if I say the wrong things, but did anybody hear what happened to Matthew West just this week?
I don't know who he is.
Matthew West is a Christian singer, songwriter. So he wrote a song for his daughters. He must have either preteen or teenage daughters about modesty, right? Wanting them to be protected from too much attention from boys. I didn't even ever hear the song before it got taken off, but he called it Modest is Hottest, right? The whole thing is a play on words. For instance, he tells them, what the boys really like is if you wear a turtleneck and dress slacks, right? So he's right. So that's what he said is hot. And he tells them how he doesn't want them to dress and what he doesn't want to see them doing on the internet, right? It's very tongue in cheek, but I'm sure it's from a dad's heart, right? That's the right frame of mind. Well, he got blasted by Christians, by progressive Christians who said, first of all, he has no right to tell his daughters how to dress and that he's demeaning them because God doesn't care how they dress, which is not true. I can give you the scriptures. Second of all, they said he was, they called him a creep and that he was perverted because he was telling his daughters how to be hot. I gave you one sentence. Was he telling his daughters how to be hot? No, he's lying to them.
He's being sarcastic, yes.
Sarcastic. So they called him a creep and horrible. Then, to make matters worse, a pastor, some pastor I've never heard of, came out and wrote his own song in contrast to the song. And he told his daughter, called her a queen, and told her she could do whatever she wanted. She could dress how she wanted. She could dance how she wanted all over the internet. And so he got called fine, and Matthew West got called a creep by the Christian community, not all the Christian community. I think he didn't know what hit him. He took it down and apologized.
Oh, no.
And young girls were loving this song. Young girls and moms apparently were just having fun with this song. And this just happened this last week. He was a prey. He literally became a prey. And that's just one example, but such a sad one. And to me, it's the one that really speaks volumes about where we are because it was all innocent. There's nothing there.
Oh, and you know, the fact that he felt like he had to give in, to fold,
Yeah.
other pressure, that's just
Yeah.
sad for him. I'm sure his own conviction was, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong," but
No,
I mean, I don't want to ruin my career over this.
yeah, I don't know, because I didn't see any of his own. It
Yeah.
was two other podcasters that were trying to make sense of it, and we're trying to weigh this back and forth about where we really are. And I think he got blindsided, and maybe in hindsight, I would hope that other people watching would know, no, you didn't do anything wrong. Stand by your convictions and tell them where they're wrong, because scripturally he's right and they're wrong. So,
We are hard on our own. We
yeah,
are very
and
hard
so
on our own.
we're in a place, I think the homework asked you if you've been here in a similar place. I think I would say that I have, but on a much, much, much smaller scale, but I would say I'm also expecting it to get much stronger here in the possibly very near future, because God asks us to do hard things sometimes, and it's not always going to be popular. So did anybody have a more specific answer than that?
Yeah, if you don't accept there's, evil is disguised as good. And if you don't accept that evil is good, then you are intolerant. Where I worked, person decided to change gender.
Okay,
And if you weren't on board with, I mean, you couldn't say what you thought. You had to say it was absolutely wonderful. If you didn't say it was wonderful, you were intolerant and evil. And yeah, you just had to keep your mouth shut.
Yep.
Otherwise, you called in by the good Catholic priests and told how terrible you were, or the Jesuit priest, sorry, the Jesuits, and told how, intolerant you were because you didn't accept that. He decided I thought it was the saddest thing I ever heard. I thought that he was so sad and has lived his life that long and has been so unhappy that his solution was to decide that he was now a woman. I also wondered what message that sends to his little boy, that daddy is so unhappy with being a man, daddy's now a girl. And you didn't dare say that. You would lose your job.
Even to supposed believers, yes.
Right, yeah. Yeah, a place where with crucifixes on the wall, although by the prayers, that, yeah, whatever. Not gonna even get into all of that stuff, but yeah, if you're not, then you are intolerant and evil. Then you don't accept these things that in your heart, are wrong.
Yeah, we cannot even have a conversation anymore. You can't even discuss it. There's no, and so while we're being accused of being intolerant, there's absolutely no tolerance, none.
Right.
You are done. You're just done immediately. And that issue appears to be the one, to me, that Satan has just taken a very strong hold of and has run with, to the degree, again, we could get off track so easily. But this week there's I think it was put on a documentary. There is a couple that have switched genders on each side, and the man is actually trying to breastfeed their child, thinking it might work. Because of course, if he says he's a woman, he's a woman. And of course it didn't. The reporter's asking him, did you get any milk out? Well, no, but we'll supplement with bottles. I mean, that's the world we live in. And yes, we can't say that there's an obvious problem with that.
Yeah, that it's not wonderful. They've not become their true self. They have something very wrong. And society, it's sad that because obviously it's Satan, but these are people with really sad issues that are being taken advantage of by other people to prove how tolerant and loving they are. And they're not. They're using those people to boost themselves. It's so upside down.
It's a confused world.
It's a confused world. And this week as well, I was taken back to Isaiah chapter 6 when we talked about sin this whole week. This idea that from that chapter you get that without acknowledgement of sin, there's no healing. That sentence just still rings with me with people who think what love is to tell you whatever you want is okay, where God has a very specific thing that works for you. And there's help that's needed sometimes, and we love the people, but if we don't stand for truth that God stands for, it doesn't help. It really doesn't help anybody. And there's no healing. And it is, I think, sad is the right word. And it is, yeah, you're right. That is the one that appears right now to be that's it. You're done. Your history if you don't buy into that. So
I was in the position like that with a boss, and I knew it was coming to the point because it kept coming up. And then she just kind of sort of asked me one day how I felt about it. I said, the only thing that I can say right now is that I just respect your choice. You know, we're allowed to choose what we want to do. And that's the only thing that I could think of to say. I said, I don't agree with it, but I respect your choice. So that means we can still work together, and I'm not going to treat you any different because that's what you chose to do. But I can't come
Yes.
and hang out at your house, and I can't, you know, and I don't want to hear about your affairs and all of that. I mean, you can kind of keep that to yourself. I'm good. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to treat you any different, but no, I can't hang out with you. Sorry.
Yeah. If you're allowed to have that, that's great. But a lot of people aren't even allowed to just say that. You have to be fully on board, or nothing else is enough. And so, yes, we are in this place where I think it's not long before we're going to have to look at verses like this one and understand where we are. And then God has something he's going to talk about right here. When we feel like we're prey, God's response is what? How does he feel about that when it happens?
He's displeased.
Right? Because that is not his justice. When people who are really saying what's the true good, not evil is called good and good is called evil, when real good is called real good, he calls that injustice. And he looks and sees it, and then what's he think or is going to do about it? Anything?
I just wrote, God did it.
God did it.
God handled it. God did it. He just said,
Yeah.
look, I can't find nobody else. I'm going to handle this myself.
Right? He says there was no one to intercede. And then what's the description like of what the action he's going to take?
His own arm brought salvation to
Mhm.
him.
To him.
Yeah. Yeah. Dressed like what?
A warrior.
A warrior that we have a picture of from where?
Ephesians
6, Ephesians 6, right? The armor of God. And I just found this so interesting because we know that description for us also tells us that our battle is spiritual. And I think that that's something that people don't realize either. We're never trying to say, maybe some people are, we're never talking about hating people. But there's a spiritual battle that we are called to engage, and we have to engage the spiritual battle of it. And God tells us even how to do it. And I think that's our sort of answer to our last discussion about being under attack, is to be ready, to have on this armor. There's two pieces here that he describes in the exact same way that they're described in Ephesians. What are the two that seem to be very important here to have on?
Righteousness as a breastplate.
Yeah.
And helmet of salvation.
Yeah. What's so big? Why the breastplate? Why righteousness as a breastplate? Why do we have to have that covered? Dee Dee?
Protect your heart and your head.
Protect your heart and your head. So first of all, in a very real, literal, physical sense, how are you going to do if somebody takes a sword to you in either one of those two areas?
Fatal.
That's not good.
Not gonna do
Fatal,
well.
right? Fatal, most likely. It's not going to be pretty if you get a sword to the head or a sword to the heart. And then spiritually, what's the importance of those two areas, the head and the heart?
Well, that's how we love God, and that's how we know God, is with our head and our heart. So yeah, those are very important.
Yeah.
That's how we learn about God, is with both, with our head and our heart.
Yeah, the heart and the mind.
Yeah. Good summary, Dee Dee. Way to put that. Yeah, we need those areas if we're going to stand, as Ephesians 6 tells us. we have to be able to know that that salvation is ours, because when your salvation's secure, your eternity is secure, is that going to help us be able to stand through the hard things, like times like real like persecution? It might become persecution. And then this love of God, our hearts are knowing him there, you know, that's the time when you want to stand and fight, is when you love somebody, right? When you love them and you have this ability. And also when he comes, he's also very much coming to do what? What's the picture of how he's coming and dressed here? What's
Vengeance.
Vengeance.
vengeance? So God's
Real.
pretty clear. Do we ever have to go getting vengeance for any of these things that we deal with?
Vengeance
No.
is mine, he said.
It's his, says the Lord, even though that's not what it says here. And do you think he's going to do a better job than we would?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's got words in here we would never think to say, that we, even our worst enemies, we would probably not describe what we were going to do to them in the way God describes what will happen to his adversaries at the end. And then he says, when this happens, they will do what? What will happen for people? The so.
They fear the name of the Lord,
Yep,
and then they see his glory.
yep. Yep, and who's coming?
Redeemer
Where is he
Ooh.
coming?
to Zion,
Yes, and for who?
to those who turn from transgressions.
Right, so there's that promise that you're in sin, but those of you who turn, there's your Redeemer is coming to you. And this promise in verse 21 of what?
Covenant I never knew existed.
This covenant, right?
Yeah. Never had
What-
seen that before.
Yeah. What is what's added to the covenant here that maybe we didn't always see with Old Testament kind of promises above covenant until you look up the verses that we looked at? What does he say is going to be in this covenant or with you through this covenant?
His words.
His words and his
Spirit.
spirit's going to be part of this covenant. And so in the homework, I think on pages 70 and 71, they gave you some cross references on covenant. And these are so good. These are a little bit longer, but so you had 2 from Jeremiah and 2 from Ezekiel, and you guys can kind of take a second if you need to see what you jotted in your notes about Jeremiah 31. And then I think was Jeremiah 32 or 36. Let's see which one.
I
had
found your one
Jeremiah
heart, one way.
Yes, there it is, right? I was a little premature last week when I was talking about it. That's why that's title is what I have, is because of that verse and because of covenant. Yeah, so what did you guys find out about covenant from these Old Testament prophecies?
I had Jeremiah 31, 34.
Uh-huh.
It said, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them and write it on their heart, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. They will not teach again, each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they all will know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wrongdoing, and their sin I will no longer remember.
So if we look at Jeremiah 31 and we look at Isaiah, what covenant is God promising to them, even in the Old Testament? They use the word here.
His spirit, you know, the law in your heart is the Holy Spirit within us.
Okay, so when was that going to come to them?
Days are coming.
Yes, when I will make a new
New
covenant.
covenant.
Who
Yes.
brought the new covenant?
Jesus.
Jesus brought the new covenant. So once again, as Jesus sat at the Last Supper and he said to you, behold, the new covenant, which I give you. Some people might have thought, wait a minute, we know these verses. We know the new covenant, spirit on our hearts, not on stone. Wait a minute. But apparently not, or they didn't want to see it. We're not sure. But this is their promise again of Jesus coming. Such a good passage, and Pat read it for us. Any other thoughts or ideas you guys jotted down about what you saw there?
No, but just Chris, that's one of the things you just said about the disciples. Maybe they didn't see it. That's one of the things that has always been encouraging to me, is that the disciples were not the brightest bulbs in the pile, and yet look what they became. So I always take a little encouragement, because I mean Jesus is always calling them dull. So I always just find that encouraging, that, well, hey, these guys managed to figure it out. They weren't all that bright, so maybe I'll get it.
Yes. And that's the other encouragement, is that we've had Isaiah saying, I've told you these things in advance so you know. And we know Jesus said that to them at least 3 times. I'm telling you in advance before it happens, so that after it happens, you'll remember and you'll believe me, knowing they needed that sort of. And so we have that promise for now too. It is so good. It is encouraging to know that he kept them around despite their dullness. So how about Jeremiah 32? That add anything to the picture for you guys?
That's the one I think it was like, that's why you need the breastplate of righteousness, because his word is going to be written on your heart.
Hey, yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. The words everlasting and forever are in here.
Mhm.
And then he says, I will never stop doing good to them.
Yes, yes. He already gave them that promise as well, and he's going to do that. He talks a lot about the land in this one as well. And there's one I want to point out, we haven't gotten the place where I would put it in my notes, but as we get ready to do chapter 60, if you look at verse 42, this ties into some things he has said before as well. For thus says the Lord, just as I have brought all this great calamity on this people, so I will bring on them all the good that I have promised them. That reminder that in both cases, he's keeping his promises. It's like, I promised you judgment when I told you all the way back in Deuteronomy, choose life or choose death, choose blessing or choose cursing, choose obedience or choose disobedience. Both of those things will come with certain things. And here he says, I've done calamity, but I'm also going to bring them good news. So I like that verse because it relates to a verse we're going to have in chapter 60. How about Ezekiel? There were 2 fairly long passages there as well. Ezekiel 36 and Ezekiel 39.
Going to bring back the people to their land,
Okay.
taking people out of the nations. He's
Okay.
giving a new heart, new spirit, so they
Yeah.
can follow God's desire. And they will remember their sins and loathe themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I like how it said he's going to put his spirit within you to cause you to walk in his statutes and obey my rules. It's going to be an internally driven thing, not a law, legalistic thing. So
Yeah.
regarding the Sabbath or fasting or like that,
That's right.
the Lord's going to lead us, he's going to
That's
lead you
right.
where you need to go. And your way may not be exactly my way, but
That's right. Yeah.
it's God speaking to you.
Yep. Personal relationship, like you said before. There's a lot of talk about that cleanness and you were clean or filthy, and now he's going to change that. There's this clean picture that will happen once covenant is made, which is a good picture of him not seeing their sin anymore. in this particular passage, I also like the fact that at the beginning and at the end, he says, I do not do this for your sake, but for my holy name's sake, which you have profaned, and I have to make them know that I am the Lord, right? Again, there's this tendency, and I know it was used against the Jews at the time of the Holocaust, that they said, and this is also what replacement theologists believe, that Israel's sin was so great that God wouldn't have taken them back. He wouldn't have forgiven them. Do you know God's saying here, as he says to us, it's not about them. It's not about you or what you do or don't do. It's about his reputation. It's about
Mhm.
his name. And he has to have his name honored. He
Right.
has to keep his word. Even if he didn't want to take them back or take us back, he has to because he said he would. That's covenant. And at the end of that passage, he says the same thing. Not for your sake do I do this. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded for your own ways. He's doing it for him, which sort of takes away any other argument about anybody's sin being too bad, or Israel broke their relationship with God. They did, but he still said, I didn't break my part. I'm still going to take you back, which is the God we want to have, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
One I want to have, that's for
Yeah.
sure. And then how about 39, Ezekiel 39? Anything different or new you want to add there?
The three things I had jotted down about that.
Okay.
Set, set my glory among the nations.
Yep.
All fell by the sword, and pour out my spirit upon the house of Israel.
Yeah,
Those were the things that impacted me on
good,
that read.
good. Again, the idea is here that it's for his own sake.
Mhm.
There's that repeated phrase of then they will know that I am the Lord.
Pour out his spirit on Israel.
Yeah, and in fact, with that, in that last verse, in verse 29, he has said, I will not hide my face from them anymore, right? That same idea we had last week or the week before when he talked about, I'm going to take this cup of wrath from you and you're never going to drink it again, right? Once I remove it, anything that happens to them from the future will not be from him. And so those promises are so good in covenant, what they have with him. Any other thoughts or reminders, and then we'll move on to chapter 16. This is the good one, right? This one, there's all kinds of great stuff there. So Pat, can you start, and then Dee Dee, and then I guess Fran? We have 3 pages.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I starting with 60?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Lift up your eyes round about and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons will come from afar, and your daughters will be carried in the arms. Then you will see and be radiant, and your heart will thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea will be turned to you. The wealth of the nations will come to you. A multitude of camels will cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba will come, and they will bring gold and frankincense. They will bear good news of the praises of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar will be gathered together to you. The rams of Nebel will minister to you, and they will go up with acceptance on my altar. And I shall glorify my glorious house. Who are these who fly like a cloud and like doves to their lattices?
Surely the coastlands will wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish will come first to bring your sons from afar, their silver and gold with them, for the name of the Lord your God and for the Holy One of Israel, because he has glorified you. Foreigners will build up your walls, and their kings will minister to you. For in my wrath I struck you, and now in my favor I have had compassion on you. Your gates will be open continually. They will not be closed day or night, so that men may bring to you the wealth of nations with their kings led in procession. For the nation and the kingdom which will not serve you will perish, and the nations will be utterly ruined. The glory of Lebanon will come to you, the juniper, the box tree, and the cypress together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I shall make the place of my feet glorious. The sons of those who afflicted you will come bowing to you, and all those who despised you will bow themselves at the soles of your feet. And they will call you the city of the Lord, the Zion, the Holy One of Israel. Whereas you have been forsaken and hated, with no one passing through, I will make you an everlasting pride, a joy from generation to generation.
You will also suck the milk of nations and suck the breast of kings. Then you will know that I, the Lord, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Instead of bronze, I will bring gold, and instead of iron, I will bring silver, and instead of wood, bronze, and instead of stones, iron. And I will make peace your administrators and righteousness your overseers. Violence will not be heard again in your land, nor devastation or destruction within your borders. But you will call your walls salvation and your gates praise. No longer will you have the sun for light by day, nor for brightness will the moon give you light. But you will have the Lord for an everlasting light, and your God for your glory. Your sun will no longer set, nor will your moon wane. For you will have the Lord for an everlasting light, and the days of your mourning will be over. Then all your people will be righteous. They will possess the land forever. The branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. The smallest one will become a clan, and the least one a mighty nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in its time.
Okay, beautiful verse that starts. One of my favorites. I actually love this. You actually see this verse on Christmas cards. Isaiah 60 verse 1. It's actually one of my favorites when I see this one. And this light that's going to come. So initially, it sounds like this is the light that will come with Jesus the first time. By the time we get to the end, I think we see some second tier prophecy in there, because it sure doesn't sound like all of that has happened yet. But as this light has come, what else do we learn? What does this passage tell us?
Nations will come to the light.
Yeah, because what's it like on the earth for them? It's behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. So they're in darkness, but literally see light as if it's just there above God's people, and they come to that light, which I think is an amazing picture. What will they bring when they come? Nations and kings. There's a whole description from verse 4 to 9, I think.
Bring some camels, gold, frankincense.
Yes, wealth, abundance, right? I don't know, the verse that says a multitude of camels will cover you, I'm not sure that sounds great to me. but I think it just means great wealth, right?
Yeah.
It does make me laugh when I read it, but yeah, they're bringing all this wealth, right? Flocks. When they come up, it says they'll even come to God's altar. And how will God handle that when they come?
Glorified.
They have acceptance.
Yeah, he's
Acceptance.
going to accept them, like we saw in that other chapter, where once these nations turn to him and come, he will accept them and his altar. Good. What else, this relationship from foreigners and kings, what happens? You know, what else are they going to do, or what else do you guys see as we move forward?
They're gonna build up their walls, they're gonna be working, I think, alongside them. Kings will minister to you. They're gonna be on board. They'll be supporting, at first, when I started reading this, I thought, well, this is all about Jesus. And then I said, no, it's about Jerusalem. It's about,
Yes,
the city
yes,
on the hill. It's
yes,
a city of light. It's the epitome of where, heaven on earth for all of us to think about.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it was
How
kind of,
important is that city? I mean, we just see it all the time. It is the place where things are going to happen, where they did and where they will yet happen. Good. It was verse 10 that made me think about Jeremiah 32:42, where he says, in my wrath, I struck you, and in my favor, I've had compassion on you. That idea that he's going to do both things when you have done both things that he said will result in those actions, both wrath and compassion, keeping his word. What if the nations don't serve them? This is a good reminder here. It talks about the ones that will, but what will happen to those who don't?
Utterly
will
ruined.
perish
Perish.
and be utterly ruined.
Yep, both those things. He talks about this glory coming, and he uses
no.
trees, which is interesting, right? He keeps using like trees
Not
that are kind
again.
of the bad trees to use, and then the beautiful trees, what will they be used for?
For the beauty of his sanctuary.
Yeah, again, where his feet are going to be, right? So important to know where this is happening. People coming to them in that city. And he talks to them about how they have been treated. They've been forsaken and hated, but how will they be?
And
That this
Go ahead.
those people that afflicted them, that will now bow to them. Everybody, and the ones that despise them will bow to them. So everybody's going to recognize how Israel as special.
Yep. And when that happens, he does this phrase. He likes to have mentioned that then they will know. Then you will know. What will they know?
You're the city of the Lord, Zion, the Holy One of Israel,
Yeah.
the Zion.
Yeah. And then that he's the Lord. How else does he describe himself in this one verse? He gives all these names. You will know that I, the Lord, am your. How's he
God.
describing him?
Zion and the Holy One of Israel.
Yep. Savior, Redeemer,
Yeah.
Mighty One of Jacob. If we're up in verse 16,
Ooh.
maybe I jumped too far ahead for you guys.
Okay. I see it.
Oh yeah, because he had a good list as well with the city. You're right. The city of the Lord, the Zion of the Holy One. And then he continues, and you'll know that he was the one who was your savior. There's that word redeemer. And then what's going on in the next verses? What's going to happen to everything that they have?
Looks like he's bringing the best.
He's bringing the best, right? Every
He'd like to
example,
find
he
the best.
switches it out for the better thing.
Yeah.
And then here, now we've come back to peace, right? He said, when you're in your wickedness, you don't know it, but now what will happen?
There will be no violence or devastation or destruction within their borders.
Yeah,
Peace and righteousness. A lot of peace is the administrator, righteousness the overseer. So lots of peace and righteousness.
yeah.
Mhm.
Being led by them, right? It sounds like, instead of
Mhm.
not finding them at all. And then we have this beautiful picture with one word you probably focused on a lot. What's the main thing we're going to see about this time frame?
God will be among the people.
Yep.
Lord will be an everlasting light.
Yes, when he's there, it's going to be an everlasting light. No longer will they need what?
The sun
The sun
the
or
moon.
the moon. Did this remind anybody of anything? They didn't say
Yeah.
it there, but this is Revelation 22, right? This is what it says at the very end of the book about those times when he comes, that there won't be any other light because he'll be the light. Beautiful picture. And your days of mourning, what will happen to those?
Over. They will be
Over.
over, no more.
They'll be over. And if you're not sure, if you weren't sure like what time frame we're talking about, then you get to verse 21 and it says all your people will be what?
Righteous.
Righteous. That has not ever happened yet, right? And we're not doing any better of a job at that than the Israelites. So all your people will be righteous. What about the land?
They will possess the land forever.
And then who's going to be glorified because of that?
God will be glorified.
God will be glorified. And then he talks about this time frame. When it's right, what will he do?
He will hasten it and make it happen.
Hasten it. Does anybody feel like time is hastening lately? I do. I feel like it's hastening. I feel like we're in this really weird time thing where this thing feels to me like we are on some kind of crazy life thing happening where every day feels kind of long, but then you look back and things that were 2 weeks ago feel like they were a year ago. Sort of different. I know as we get older, it always feels like time is going faster, but there's just something weird to me about the time that we're in right now.
Well, I feel like my physical time is hastening, but not my spiritual time. And I guess that's what I was thinking of when you asked that question.
Well, what do you mean by that, Jocelyn?
My physical time, it like every time I turn around, and maybe it's because I only get paid once a month and we always look forward to our payday. But it's like the years are going by faster because I can't believe I'm almost 69 years old and my knees are aching and all this other stuff is happening. But my spiritual time and waiting for the Lord seems like it's long and it's not moving fast enough. And even though it says your days, your years might be like a day ago, it's like everybody's dying, everybody's sick, everybody has this. The lightning hit a tree, you know what I mean? Food prices are going up. Well, Jesus, when are you coming back?
I actually do get what you're saying now. I do get that. I often wonder, okay, all right, is this not long enough? So yes, not long enough. Okay.
But only the righteous are going to be there.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh gosh, I need more time.
No, he's going to make you righteous, right? When he comes, you'll be exactly what we're supposed